Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Native American Heritage Commission's webinar to roll out the Digital Atlas of California Native Americans. My name is Christina Snyder, and I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians. I'm also the Executive Secretary for the Native American Heritage Commission. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the land I'm zooming from today is the original homelands of the Patwin Tribal Nation. To those who are not able to be here due to wildfire, COVID, and the challenges of daily life in 2020, you're in our hearts. I'm now going to walk through some of the logistics for today's webinar. First, we're recording today's presentation. The recording will be made available on the NAHC website once we edit it a little bit. You've all been muted and your cameras have been disabled. I ask that you remain muted until we get to the comments and questions portion of today's webinar. Once we get to the comments and questions portion of today's webinar, you can ask questions by using the raise hand function. If you're using the Zoom app, you should be able to use the raise hand function using the app controls, but you can also use Alt-Y in Windows and Option-Y on Mac to raise or lower your hand. If you have difficulty with the controls, you can also directly message me and let me know that you have a question, and I'll call on you and ask you to unmute your line. If you have called in, we'll first go through the raise hand questions via the app, but then I'll open the webinar for any dial-in questions. At that point, you can unmute your line using *6. Again, thank you for joining us today to go through our new web tool. Created in partnership with the California Department of Parks and Recreation with the generous financial support from the DRAM Antitrust Settlement, the Digital Atlas is a free online tool to help students and the public visualize California before, during, and after European occupation, with a focus on the Native American experience. The Digital Atlas also links to primary source evidence presented by Benjamin Madley in his 2016 book, An American Genocide, which catalogues the depredations committed by early Californians and state actors against California Native Americans. Californians may use the Atlas to learn more about the acts committed in their own communities, sometimes by the namesakes of the towns they live in, the streets they drive to work on, or their children's schools. The Digital Atlas brings to life the rich diversity, histories, and cultures of California Native peoples and the places they have called home since time immemorial. We hope to continue to support and expand the tools available for the public to learn more about the Native experiences that are foundational to the story of California. Again, as a reminder, please hold your questions until the comments and questions portion of today's call. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jason McCannell, Special Assistant to the Director of California State Parks, who will walk you through the web-based tool.
Hi, thank you, and welcome everyone. I would also like to acknowledge that I'm on land zooming into this conference that was traditionally the land of the Anishinaabe, the Patwin, and the Miwok tribal peoples. So thank you, and as Christina said, to everyone who can't be here, you're in our hearts, and we hope that you'll have a chance to watch this, to join us in the future when it's archived on the website. So a little bit about the story of the Digital Atlas of California and Native Americans. This project started out when I was working for former Governor Brown as his special assistant for research. And one of the main things that Governor Brown did with me was when novel findings would come out in various fields that he thought I had some expertise in, including history, he would ask me to go over it, contact the author, get back to him, say, is this true? And do we need to act on it? And one of the novel ideas that the governor brought to me in this very exciting position that I used to hold was the idea that genocide did occur in California. And it was largely as a result of this book in 2016, which Christina's already mentioned, Benjamin Madley's An American Genocide, that this inquiry was prompted. So I got in touch with Ben, I read the book, I went through it, I became convinced, got back to the governor, and that was ultimately how Governor Brown became the first governor to actually acknowledge that genocide occurred in California, and as far as I know, in any American state. So in the process of working towards this point where we could have that acknowledgement, which of course the current administration under Governor Newsom has expanded greatly issuing a proclamation acknowledging the genocide and establishing the Truth and Healing Council, among other actions. Benjamin Madley mentioned to me that his data should be online because a lot of people will doubt it and others will want to have access to the primary sources. So as in many other cases where genocide has occurred, to have an online remembrance site for what happened in California. And as I was thinking about this, I thought, well, I think this is very important to do, but I think it should be a lot more than that. That rather than the worst few decades in a 12,000 plus year history, that we should try to encompass the entire experience to get as much information into an online database as possible about this experience of the indigenous people of California that's been neglected, that's been swept under the rug in a lot of the ways we talk about our state, the way we name things in the state, and even been lied about in our schools, in our books, in our public discourse. So it became a very ambitious project. I wrote a proposal, and that proposal was ultimately funded for this project to be done at the Native American Heritage Commission by a legal settlement. It was an antitrust suit in the computer hardware industry. Almost poetically, this was a computer memory. So the idea that we're creating the memory of California using this funding that came out of a legal settlement, I think it's very appropriate. At the end of 2018, as Governor Brown was leaving office and the funding had arrived for this project, the position of Special Assistant to the Director that I hold at State Parks, in which I've led this project for the last 20 months, was created around the funding, and I got to work. So what we have today is not an end product. What we have today, I see as the beginning of something that will someday be much more, that will rapidly grow, in fact, as we get more contributions from different tribes, from different places that we would like to hear from. It went through a lot of permutations. I had a team of researchers working last summer for very talented young women who were each in different fields, great experts, were a huge help to me. We put together an enormous amount of data. But perhaps more important even than the research process was the consultation process, as I learned that certain parts of my initial approach to this project weren't going to work, that they were either replicating some of the things that were done in the past that we're hoping to correct for and change, or that they were inaccurate, or that they left out voices of people who needed to be represented if their culture, if their history was being represented. So the product that I'm about to demonstrate to you, and I will very shortly be sharing my screen to actually show you what this thing does, is really the result of conversations. I think about 40 tribes, both non-recognized and recognized tribes in California, have been in conversation with me, in consultation with me on various levels throughout the course of this project. And it's really those voices, I think, that have been most important in steering it to the form that it's taken today. I'd also like to acknowledge my department, the California Department of Parks and Recreation, has been incredibly helpful with coming up with any resources that I needed in terms of technology, in terms of facilities, et cetera, to make this project successful. So thank you so much to my recently outgoing director, Lisa Monget, to Liz McGurk, my deputy director, for all they did to make this project come together. So all that being said, I think if you have the invitation to this seminar, you have the link to go to the Atlas yourself. So I'm going to share my screen now at that link and just sort of walk you through some of the data that is that's in there. All right. So this is, if everyone can see it, someone please text me if you can't. This is what we call the splash page for the atlas. It has some description on it, and it has some screenshots of what it actually looks like when you're using the web application, or web app as we call it.
Jason, do you think that you are able to zoom in a bit?
Let's see. I can get to full screen, but let me launch the app and see how it looks.
Perfect, thank you.
Let me know if this is too small. Okay, it sounds fine. So when you actually launch the web app, which there's various links on that page, including the images, will launch it. You'll see a disclaimer, which I think is probably worth reading in case you can't read it on your screen. The NAHC Digital Atlas is for educational and display purposes only. The geographical information displayed in the atlas is not for use in determining locations of cultures, boundaries, or people for recognition, consultation, or any other legal or policy purpose. The resources displayed in the atlas remain the property of their owners as cited. All resources are found in the public domain or displayed with the owner's permission. The content of tribal pages reflects the ideas and beliefs of the page's creators and does not constitute an official endorsement of any particular viewpoint by the Native American Heritage Commission. Now, all that sounds like maybe a lot of sort of legal boilerplate, but what it comes down to is that, you know, we're not trying to change anyone's status or any policy or anything related to state agency consultation with this tool. It's really a public-facing tool, and also one where, due to the disclaimer, we hope that intellectual property will be safe from appropriation when people do choose to display their cultural properties or other things that they own on the site. So I think that's the most important thing. So you click through the disclaimer and you get to what I call our cultural base map. And, ooh, zooming the wrong way here. And this is, you can see the background is just a standard map of California. There's actually, at this button, one of these buttons here, there's a few different base maps you can choose from. But we'll just, oh, my window's covering it. We'll just stick with the one that we have for now. But you can see over here in the upper left, when you hit that button, you can pick different ones, plainer ones, if you don't look at so much detail behind the information. But this base map is really based on the NAHC Tribal Directory, which was originally published in 2015, which I think a lot of the people in the audience participated in putting together. And the territories, you can see that we don't actually mark territorial boundaries as hard lines like you've seen on other maps. What you have is the names of the cultures, and when you click on the map, you're going to get a pop-up that takes you to what I call a cultural portal page for that culture. And we'll do that in a second. But what I also wanted to show you is that unlike a lot of other maps like this that have been done in the past, this map is buffered. There's 10 kilometers between each of the central cultural territories on the map. And in those areas, like I've highlighted here, you're going to see more than one cultural portal linked. So we don't have the same kind of rigid lines that I think a lot of people, you know, say are not necessarily accurate or that have been used inaccurately in the past. So let's look at what happens. Let's go to Cupeño country here and look at what happens when you click on one of these portals. The default information on each tribe, and this is both recognized and non-recognized tribes, will be simply your postal address as listed in the tribal directory. Now, you can change this. You can either say, we don't want to be here at all, if you're one of the tribes listed here, or you can add to it. And there's different things you can add to it. You could add a phone number, contact email information, your own website. But I think most importantly, for my purposes today, you can have your own tribal atlas page. And I clicked on Cupeño because this idea actually came from the Pala Band of Mission Indians when I was consulting with them Chris Neho, a tribal citizen, had the idea that instead of attempting to create larger cultural representations, that each tribe should be given sort of digital sovereignty over their own page, where they can display anything they want. And here's an example right here from Paula of the tribal atlas page. These are all, there's, I believe, 5 of them have been completed at this point. They are different in the amount, in how elaborate they are, how much material they show, how much resources have gone into it. The great thing is this is an ongoing process, so you can submit, if you're a tribe, you can submit a tribal atlas page at any time, and you can update the page at any time. So this is the place where stories and images, videos, pictures of dances, things like that can be displayed, and it's all completely voluntary on the basis of each tribe deciding what they want to display. So going back to the atlas, you know, once again, these will be, since the Pala tribe is also Luiseño affiliation, you'll also see their atlas page, their link and their information listed among all the other Luiseño affiliated tribes in addition to the Cupeño. So that's just one example of tribal atlas pages and how they link to the map in the application. So I'm going to move on to something a little bit different now. This is an important button here at the upper left, the layers button. This is how you can turn the different layers of the map on and off. You can see here in the upper right corner is where it appears. So right now, only the cultural base map is on. I'm going to turn on a couple of my favorite layers and ones that I like to view together. Trails and trade relations. These are both, both of these layers come from the same paper that was published by a Berkeley anthropologist in the early 60s. And they compile information from hundreds and hundreds of different sources about trade relationships and trade routes, or routes of travel that were used before colonization in California. And actually, I want to zoom out for a minute just to say, I really like sort of the larger view on this map because, you know, rather than sort of boundaries between cultures, that it shows the connections between people and between different cultures and how dynamic and how much movement there was in the state before contact. Now, the trails don't have any information embedded in them, but like most of the layers in the map, the trade relations, the schematic blue arrows do. So if you click on one of these blue arrows between different tribes or different cultures, you'll get a little information window pop up. So this says that the Southern Valley Yokuts traded shell money with the Mojave for fire drills, digging sticks, and baskets. And I just want to pause for a minute and think about what that really means in terms of people who didn't have cars, didn't have horses, traveling all of that distance across some of the most forbidding landscapes, you know, perhaps in the entire world, to maintain that trade route. It just shows the depth of the civilization in California, and you know, just how amazing the culture that was here was before. And that's the kind of thing I think that more people should be learning in school, at the universities, at museums, and other places where we remember the state's history. A couple of other of the map layers relate to the world before European colonization. This is a layer of historical lakes and wetlands. Not extremely accurate. It was drawn in 1866, so there are cartographic errors here, but it does show you to some extent, to some degree, the extent of the wetlands and the lakes that existed in California, particularly in the Central Valley you see here, that no longer exist today. And I think these are very important for understanding the sort of cultural patterns of the state, the old transportation patterns, etc. Another map related to the world before colonization are natural resources. This was actually sourced from Kent Lightfoot and Otis Parrish's book, California Indians and Their Environment. which is a really good resource. There's a lot in the book that is not in the atlas, but this is a start for talking about how people in different regions in the state used different natural resources traditionally. So when you click through, it's not loading that fast. When you click through your pop-up window there, you'll get these tables of natural resources that were used in the different regions of the state, and sort of a broad categorical idea of what they were used for: food, regalia, medicines, building materials, etc. This is a part of the atlas that I think can be expanded a great deal. Much like the tribal pages, we have 5 out of potentially 170. A lot more could be done with this. Each one of these species could be related to tribal pages that talk about how these species were used. They could be linked out to natural history resources so that people could learn more about the species. So that is an interesting layer. We don't have the Eastern Sierra region. That wasn't included in the source book. So if anybody has a great source for natural resources so that we could add that, I would love to hear from you. Estimated population in 1769. This is by Sherburne Cook, published in the early 70s. So when you click on that, you'll get a pop-up giving the estimation of how many people lived in the region in 1769, the year that Spanish colonization began. You can see 83,800 in the San Joaquin Valley, substantial numbers of people in every part of the state. So now we move into the colonization period. Not very much on the missions here. They're sort of a placeholder for now, for a time when we have more data relevant to the Native American experience at the missions. I know there's multiple projects in process around the state right now to improve that record and to create those resources. So just having these on the map now, they sort of give you the pattern of settlement, and they give us a place in the future to talk about the Native American experience at those missions. Also looking at the Spanish and Mexican colonial era, we have actually for the first time in one place a digitized map of all of the Spanish and Mexican land grants in California. Not directly related to Native American history, except that this shows a pattern of land appropriation. And also many of these places will have place names that relate to tribal people and the languages that were used there. And many of them also represent the Native American experience in different ways, whether it was as labor on the ranches, as owners in some cases, or as a people that were displaced in the process. The color coding on this, you can bring up a legend for the layer that you're on and one of these other buttons. In this case, the darker blue is later in history, and the lighter blue is earlier, going back to red, the earliest ones of all in the 1700s. And when you click on one of these properties, you'll see the year they were founded, the person they were granted to, and the governor, the Spanish or Mexican governor of California who gave the grant. One thing that's interesting is that in the later period in the 1840s, you see a lot more Anglo names showing up as the person, the owner of the property. And I'm not finding one right now, but that's not important. We'll move along. Getting into the American period, also, as far as I know, digitized for the very first time, we have the treaty lands. The treaties that were signed in the 19th century between Native American tribes in California and the United States government, creating, you can see in green, these were all promised reservations, and obviously the entire city of Fresno is within a reservation today. So something happened. I'll leave it to others to talk about the history, but these were historically promised. And if you don't believe that, we have links here both to the original documents that it'll take a minute to load because it's a big PDF, and also a transcript by Robert Heiser so that you could look at. So here's the original document. If you don't want to read 19th century handwriting, that's also in this PDF that's linked from that part of the map. moving on, this is where the American Genocide data is kept. These regions are original to this project. Professor Madley didn't have his data divided by region, so this was done in-house, so to speak, to create timelines of the genocide in each part of the state, both to connect it to the map and to make it sort of more relevant to Californians who live in different communities around the state, to look at what happened near where they live or in places that they have connections to. We have, so when you click on this, you have a content warning. I think important to read. Many of the primary sources linked on this timeline contain racist language or sentiment and graphic accounts of settler colonial violence against indigenous people. So if you are not up for that, I wouldn't go into the links here because these are directly taken mostly from 19th century newspapers, and they reflect the language of the times. We have about, I think 70% of the primary sources from Madley's book are now in digital form and accessible through this map, through the atlas and the timelines that are linked to the map. We'd like to see more. If you have students in a history class, say, who need a good project working with primary sources, you can see on the timelines, you know, where, okay, I've lost the timeline. Oh, back here. You can see on the timelines where we're missing a link to the primary source. You know, so there's archives, there's places to find these. If we don't have them, it's probably just an aspect of we didn't have time within the short time frame of this project to find absolutely everything. So I encourage people to go out, do their own sleuthing, and find more primary sources to add to this collection, which I understand will be useful in many places, whether it's in the history classroom of the future or in supporting the Truth and Healing Council as they continue their inquiry into the history of the state. This is a little known part of our history. You can't really see any of it at the statewide level. You have to zoom in because these are 160-acre parcels. This is another piece of the project that came up during consultation. Melody McAdams, who works in Auburn, told me about this program of giving land to the militia soldiers who served in the campaigns of the California Genocide. It was something that I'd seen mentioned in various places, including Madley's book, but she's the one who tipped me off that all of these records are publicly available and could conceivably be added to something like the Atlas, and indeed that's exactly what I did. These are, each of these little blue squares are parcels of land that were granted to a militiaman for service in campaigns against Native Americans in California. Here we are looking at Lincoln, California. You can see that very much of the land around Lincoln and various other communities around the state, I don't mean to zero in on one of them, was originally privatized with this instrument. Now, most of these aren't situations where the militia soldier himself became the owner of the land. They were usually immediately signed over to land speculators or other people who wanted to farm the land or develop it in some way. So you'll see on these pop-ups for the bounty land, you'll see the name of the patentee, which is what they call the person who received the land, as well as the warrantee, the soldier who actually served, as well as the unit he served in, the rank he served in, and the campaign he served in. So this is going to be food for thought, I think, for a lot of people. It's something that hasn't been talked about much in the past. And then the final map there, this is really straight from BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, is reservations and allotments in California today. Once again, very hard to see from a high statewide level. You can see the labels, but the land is too small to see. I think it's kind of interesting to turn on the bounty lands and the current reservations just to sort of compare the size of the land that was given in this area by the federal government to the militiamen who engaged in campaigns of genocide versus the amount that was ultimately given to the recognized tribes in the area. Once again, food for thought. I'm getting a little bit tired of talking myself now. So if I can figure out how to do this.
Are you trying to stop sharing?
I'm trying to stop sharing. Okay,
I can help you.
I found it. Sorry about that. Obviously I haven't used Zoom a lot in the last few months as other people have become great experts with it. Different fields for different folks. Yeah, just sort of as concluding remarks before I open it out to comments. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone, I can't name them all, who helped me with this, helped me conceptualize it, helped me understand the issues that I was dealing with, helped me get past the technical challenges that we had. And I hope that everyone listening will, you know, think of ways that they can contribute to make this and even make this a more valuable resource, whether it's by thinking about putting together a page, an atlas page for your own tribe, getting in touch with me to tell me, you know, sort of your reactions to it. Really, just about anything you want. You can get in touch with me through NAHC, and that's that. I'm going to give it back to Christina and then open it out for questions.
Great, thank you. I also noticed that Professor Madley is on if he'd like to make a few comments, no pressure, but feel free if you'd like to say anything, Professor Madley. And then also, Jason, your contact information has been shared, so everybody may be reaching out to you. Professor Madley?
I can't wait to hear from you all.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Christina. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you both. This has been a huge project to get this iteration up and running. And I want to encourage everyone else to contribute, and especially to help Jason with all of the missing information, because this is really just the beginning of what can be a very helpful forward-facing platform for sharing information. It's a place that I plan to direct my graduate students and undergraduates, and I know that many others will be sending their students here as well. It's a great resource, but it can't really realize its full potential unless community members engage and are part of this. That will really bring all the information into the public sphere for people to access. So I encourage you to reach out to Jason. And I'm happy to answer questions, but this is really, I want to be clear, this is really Jason's doing. It's an incredible effort that he has put together with a huge team of people, making contacts with folks up and down the state, from the border with Oregon all the way down to the border with Mexico. But again, I encourage people to reach out, point out errors, omissions, and to really make this thing reach its potential. People do need to contribute. It's a public platform.
Thank you, Ben.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So Jason, we did have a few questions come in via chat. The first one, just to remind everybody, this is being recorded and will be available on our website. And then, will there be login requirements to this info, or available to everybody in general? I think part of that question is whether there's sensitive information, and I think that came out through the consultation process, if you want to chat about that a bit.
Oh, absolutely. A big piece of work that I did that you can't see now is a collection of place names and sites around the state. I collected about 1,700 of those from anthropological sources. And it was over the course of consulting that I realized this is not the way to go about restoring the indigenous place names in California, specifically because of the issue of sensitive sites, the possibility that even information in the public domain, by highlighting it in a digital format, that you could potentially jeopardize sensitive sites in different ways. So there is no, as far as I know, there's no sensitive information in this public-facing Atlas tool. If I'm wrong about that, please do get in touch with me right away and let me know. But as far as everything you see, everything that I've demonstrated, that is, it's just available. There's no password protection. It's, as I said, public-facing.
And that, though, is with the exception for tribal-specific pages. To the extent that you all would like to do one, those are managed by the tribe. Correct, Jason?
What I've been doing is laying them out. It's sort of like a review process where I lay out the page, send back the layout to the people who have sent me the materials, get their approval. And we could, if this becomes a much bigger thing with lots of tribes working on pages at the same time, we could set up a process where tribes can log in and manage their own tribal pages. That's really possible. But for now, since there's so few, it's all just going through me.
Great. And then again, Jason's contact info is in the chat for those of you that would like to contact him. We have a question. Do you find the BIA data to be spatially accurate?
I really haven't run any tests on the BIA data, or honestly, practically any data that I've seen other than the source. So what you see is what you get. If there's issues with the BIA data, I'd like to hear about it, and we can talk about, how this technology, could be maybe used to highlight that or to pursue solutions.
Great. The next question is, have you considered creating an ESRI Story Map to go along with this webpage so that you can provide some of the context you just provided to people who do not have the benefit of your presentation?
Well, hopefully everyone will have the benefit of my presentation once it is archived at NAHC, but I also think the story map is a really powerful medium and a great idea. I hadn't thought about a story map at the statewide level. What I've been thinking about in terms of story maps was more, as I'm consulting with tribes about what kind of materials they'd like to put up, if there are tribal story maps that could be put together and then linked into the Atlas. I think that would be really cool. Statewide story map, wow, big concept, and I would definitely want to work with, I'm a geographer, I would want to work with a historian like Ben to be sure I'm getting the story right, as well as, of course, massive consultation with tribal people to mount something like that. But I think it's a great idea, and I'm looking ahead to all kinds of things that could be added as components to this project, because as I said, this is just the beginning. This is a platform that can absorb any amount of information.
Great. And then we have a question, will this be on the NAHC website? So this tool is already live. It's at nahc.ca.gov/CP, correct?
Yeah, CP was, that's kind of a placeholder. Is when we originally had it just for the cultural portals. So that's what CP is. I think it's fine. It's easy to remember.
I'm good with it. So it's live now, and then this recording will be on the NAHC website as well. Are there any of the web map service layers available for others to use in their maps?
So I'm actually, this is coming. We're talking about, there's an open data portal for the California Natural Resources Agency, who I should also acknowledge, by the way, at agency level, I've had an enormous amount of support, and it's been great. So one of the things that the agency would like to do is add all of the map layers to their open data portal so that anybody with their own GIS resources or their own shapefile reader will be able to use and manipulate the files themselves. So that's coming. I'm actually not sure, it's possible, but I'm not completely certain whether Those files are also available at sort of a backend site at CNRA. I'm gonna have to check with tech staff, but I'll get back to you if you send me an email.
Great. It looks like there's general interest in that because some of the tribes have their own GIS databases as well.
Absolutely, and I'm going to loop back with agency staff to see if the shapefiles are just out there already. I'm not totally sure, but there will definitely be a way to get them in the near future.
Great. We have a question. Have any tribes logged in and submitted info yet that's publicly viewable? So we saw Paula. Do you have a list of the other ones so that tribes can get a sense of what people are submitting?
Yes, there is a link. I don't know if I want to go back into screen sharing to show it to you, but on the sidebar, on a desktop, or on the list of links at the bottom of the screen, if you're looking at a mobile device, there's a list of all of the tribal atlas pages, among lists of other things like the genocide timelines, the cultural portals, kind of a table of contents. And you can find one section of it shows all of the pages that tribes have submitted so far. Like I said, there's 5. A mix of both federally recognized and unrecognized tribes, different scales of effort, you know, from lots and lots of multimedia to just a short story. Whatever's there is good. This is giving you a voice and putting you online. So, and there's always the possibility of adding more down the road or making changes.
And then for errors, if people find them, do you want to be contacted directly to address those?
Yeah, it's all going to happen through me in the foreseeable future. So yeah, send them my way for sure. I definitely, one thing is that I don't feel like enough eyes have been on this prior to launch. So I'm very, very much relying on the online crowd to let me know where I've gone wrong.
Great. And then we had a comment about the tribes that are included. Just for everybody, the tribes that were included in this are all of the tribes on the Heritage Commission's list. So if there are any that are missing, it's because they have not submitted or been processed yet to be on that list. So if you have further questions, you can continue to submit them in chat. Oh, there's another one. When is the next meeting/webinar with tribes to provide further input? How many Native researchers are working with you currently, and who will continue to manage incoming information and update and elaborate on resources?
Okay, 3 different questions. That was from Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl. So the next opportunity that tribes will have to interact with me will be at the SHPO conference. That's the State Historic Preservation Officer, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer Summit that's coming up actually just next week. And there will be a whole session with state parks, including the Atlas, and everybody will be welcome to join there. I can refer folks to the organizer if they get in touch with me. As far as people working with me right now, no one. I'm an army of one at the moment. I hope to bring more people on board in the future when there's more funding to do that, but for the time being, it's just me. And then in terms of ongoing, you know, once again, you know, our grant has run out. Parks continues to support my position. And once again, I want to acknowledge that that's, you know, extremely generous and shows their commitment to this project. In the foreseeable future, I expect to be there. And as, you know, time goes on, I also expect that, you know, especially as NAHC continues to expand its staff, that there will be plenty of people around, plenty of positions that the Atlas management could be moved to in my well, inevitable future absence at some point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think for context too, we're also looking to staff a bit of the truth and healing work. So that is in process and will also support this tool, since this tool will be very essential to that work. There's a question Are you thinking ahead about safeguarding this resource into the future under other administrations? In other words, what if we get a governor who wants the atlas to go away? So they want to rewrite history and change policy. I think the administration is always subject to the directives of the governor. I would say that in order for us to be able to safeguard, it has to go through legislation, which isn't quite our purview. But I think, Jason, if you have thoughts about that, I think a lot of this information is already generally available to the public.
You know, once again, with the open data side of it, there absolutely folks who are concerned about preserving this data would have every opportunity to create mirror sites and other places where it could be stored, where it could be displayed. I think, you know, it's important to me that this be displayed on a state website because it's about the state. It's about the state acknowledging its past. But if the political winds change and we have leadership in the state that doesn't want to address this past in the future, I think that making the data open and available and having places where it can be hosted, whether that's in Indian country or in academia or elsewhere, will be a pretty good safeguard that it will continue to exist even if it's not with the state.
And then we have, don't be afraid to tap into those tribes that have GIS programs and or the California GIS Council Tribal Work Group with a link. So that is also a resource in case any of those layers are helpful.
And I'd love to come talk to the work group if anybody involved is, you know, organizing things. It'd be a good opportunity for me.
Great. I will send you Dory's email if that's okay with Dory, which I'm assuming it is. Okay, good. She said yes. And then you can connect directly because she's, you know, right in that. If there are additional comments, questions, please feel free to do the chat, or you can raise your hand and I can call on you. Or if you have called in at this time and you'd like to unmute your line to ask a question, it's *6 to unmute your line. We'll just give it a couple minutes. Okay, I mean, I think it's looking like folks are, is it important to folks to make clear federal or state recognition status? I don't think that we differentiate on that, Jason.
I've done nothing in terms of, you know, where the tribes are listed. I'm not differentiating. I kind of feel like that's the federal government's business and not ours necessarily, but one way that recognition is represented in the atlas would be through the layer of allotments and reservations, right? Because all of those would represent tribes that have federal status.
Yeah, and I think from the Commission's perspective, this is a tool to make real the history of colonization in California. And so recognition, again, is on the feds, you know, under lots of different layering laws. So I think for the purposes of this work, it's probably less important and more of something that if tribes want to highlight that in their individual pages, they can.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. The Tribal Atlas page is a great place to talk about recognition issues from either side. And I encourage people to do that. But as far as the ultimate listing goes, I don't know if it makes a lot of sense to tag everybody that way rather than sort of creating an equal list.
Yeah, I like to say that the state doesn't like to be in a position of sorting tribes. So, and especially in this space where everybody has this shared history of genocide. It looks like we're kind of winding down on questions. Do you have any last remarks, Jason?
Just, I'm awed and overwhelmed by the beauty of California and its history and people. And this is probably the most important thing I've done in my life. Maybe it doesn't look like much to you, but thanks to everyone. I don't know, I feel very emotional right now. That this is, that this is now something that people can use, that other people can take for their own, now that I've given it to you. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of the commission, we really, we appreciate all of the hard work you've done. We know that this is a real passion project for you, and really appreciate just everything that you've put into this and all of the hard work that you've done. There are a few hanging questions. What I'm going to do is save all of the questions and have them be addressed individually, if that works for you.
Sure, and I mean, if it makes sense, we could even think about putting up an FAQ as more of these questions roll in.